The morning Nadia realized her car was gone, the sky outside was the dull gray of old dishwater. She stood in the doorway of the small house she had shared with her husband Kamran for 3 years, staring at the empty spot where her white Suzuki Alto always sat, the car she had bought herself, with her own savings, before she had ever heard the name Kamran or his mother Rihanna. She blinked, once, twice, thinking perhaps she had simply forgotten where she parked it. But there was no other spot. The gate was closed. The driveway was bare. She turned and walked back inside, where Kamran sat eating breakfast with the unbothered ease of a man who already knew the answer to every question she was about to ask. "Where is my car?" she said quietly. He didn't look up from his plate. "Ami needed it." Those 3 words landed in the room like 3 stones dropped into still water. Ami needed it. Not took it. Not borrowed it. Needed it. As though Nadia's car was simply a household resource, available to whoever required it most. And clearly, that person was never going to be Nadia herself. "She could have asked me," Nadia said. "She didn't want to bother you." Nadia stood very still. She had learned, over 3 years, that stillness was the only armor available to her in this house. Reacting gave them something to use against her. Crying made her too emotional. Raising her voice made her disrespectful. Asking too many questions made her difficult. So she had learned to stand still and absorb things, the way old walls absorb damp. Quietly, invisibly, until one day the whole structure begins to rot from within. This was not the first thing that had disappeared. 6 months ago it was her job. Rihanna had made it quietly unbearable until Nadia resigned. Before that, it was her friendships, one by one, discouraged and starved of time until they withered. Before that, her confidence, chipped away in small daily comments disguised as concern. "You don't cook the way he likes. You dress too boldly. Why do you need to go out alone?" The car was simply the latest thing, but it was also the most visible, the most undeniable. It was the thing that could take her somewhere. And that, Nadia understood now, with cold and perfect clarity, was exactly why it was gone. She waited until Kamran left for work before she allowed herself to feel it. The moment the gate clicked shut behind him, something in Nadia's chest cracked open. Not dramatically, not with sobs that shook the walls, but in the quiet, exhausted way that a person cries when they have been holding themselves together for so long that the effort itself becomes the breaking point. She sat down on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, knees pulled to her chest, and she let the tears come silently, because even alone she had forgotten how to make noise. She sat there for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. She almost called her friend Sana. Then her cousin Mariam. Then she scrolled past both names and stopped at the one she always hesitated to call. Not because he wouldn't help, but because calling him meant admitting how bad it had truly become. It meant saying out loud the things she had been carefully minimizing in every previous conversation. "I'm fine, Baba. It's just an adjustment. All marriages take time." She pressed call before she could talk herself out of it. He picked up on the second ring, the way he always did, as if some part of him was always waiting. Nadia. Just her name, but the way he said it, warm and certain, like a hand placed steadily on a trembling shoulder, made her breath catch. "Baba," she said, and then she told him everything. Not the cleaned-up version. Not the version where she softened Rihanna's edges and excused Kamran's silences and made herself sound stronger than she was. She told him the real version, the job, the friends, the daily erosions, and now the car. Her car. Taken without a word, without permission, without even the basic courtesy of a question. Her father listened without interrupting. That was one of his greatest qualities. He never rushed to fill silence with noise. He let her speak until she had nothing left to say, and then he was quiet for just a moment longer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and completely calm. "Beta," he said. "How far is the main gate from where you're sitting right now?" She frowned, confused. "Maybe 30 steps. Why?" "Because I want you to be ready to open it in about an hour." She felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been compressed and cold for 3 years, beginning very slowly to expand. "Baba, you don't have to. "Get your important documents," he said quietly. "Your certificates, your CNIC, anything in your name. Put them in a bag." "Baba, I'm already in the car, Nadia." A pause. Then, with the gentleness of someone who has made an unshakable decision, "Get in. This ends tonight." She pressed the phone against her heart after he hung up and stood in the middle of that kitchen. The kitchen that had never really felt like hers, and for the first time in 3 years, she did not feel alone. Baba Tariq arrived in exactly 53 minutes. Nadia knew because she had watched every one of them pass from the window, her small bag sitting by the door, her documents folded inside an envelope the way he had taught. Her, "Always keep your papers organized, Beta, because papers are proof and proof is power." She had not fully understood that lesson when he first said it. She understood it completely now. When his car turned into the street, she felt her knees go weak with relief. He parked, stepped out, and she noticed immediately that he had not come disheveled or hurried. He had come dressed properly, hair combed, expression composed, the way a man dresses when he intends to be taken seriously. That detail alone told her everything about what kind of evening this was going to be. She opened the gate before he reached it. He looked at her face, really looked, the way fathers do when they are cataloging damage they were not permitted to witness, and said nothing for a moment. Then he simply opened his arms, and she walked into them, and he held her the way he had held her as a child during thunderstorms, steady and unhurried, communicating without words that the worst had already passed. Then he stepped back, straightened his collar, and said, "Where is she?" Rehana was at home. Of course she was. It was her house, her kingdom, the carefully constructed domain over which she had presided for 30 years. She opened the door with the practiced confidence of a woman who has never once been held accountable, and the expression on her face when she saw Baba Tariq shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something behind the composure. Not quite fear, but the thing that lives just next door to it. "Bye, Sahib," she began smoothly, slipping into the register of warm formality. "What a surprise." "Please sit down, Rehana Baji," he said, politely, firmly, the way you speak to someone when you are not asking. He did not shout. He did not perform. He sat across from her at her own table, and he opened the conversation the way a surgeon opens. With precision, without cruelty, but without hesitation either. He named every single thing. The job, Nadia had been pressured to leave. The friendships methodically discouraged. The freedom incrementally removed. And finally, the car. Registered in Nadia's name alone, taken without consent, which, he mentioned quietly, had a legal term attached to it. Rehana's composure cracked somewhere around the third point. Kamran, who had arrived home mid-reckoning and stood frozen in the doorway, said nothing, and in his silence, Nadia finally saw him clearly, not as a flawed husband she could reach, but as a man who had always known and had always chosen his mother's comfort over his wife's dignity. That truth did not devastate her. It simply freed her. Nadia did not cry when she left. That surprised her. Later, the absence of tears at the moment she had imagined for so long would be the most painful of her life. She had expected grief, the way you expect rain when the clouds have been building all day. But what came instead was something quieter and far more steady. It felt like putting down a weight she had carried for so long that she had stopped noticing it was there, and only in the setting down did she understand how much of her strength had been spent, simply on holding it. She carried her own bag to her father's car, not Kamran's car, not the family car. Her car, which Baba Tariq had arranged to have returned before they left. A phone call made in Rehana's own sitting room, with a composure that left no room for argument. The keys were placed on the table in front of Nadia, without a word from the person who had taken Onom. She picked them up without looking at Rehana. She did not say anything dramatic at the door. There was no speech prepared, no final devastating line she had rehearsed in her head. She simply looked at Kamran one last time, this man she had loved, or tried to love, or perhaps loved the idea of, and found that she had nothing left to say to him either. He stood by the wall with his hands in his pockets, looking like a child waiting to be told what to do, and Nadia realized that he would stand exactly like that for the rest of his life. Waiting, choosing silence, letting things happen around him while he told himself he was keeping the peace. She walked out. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were honest. And honesty felt like oxygen after years of a room with all the windows sealed. She moved back into her childhood home, slept in her old room, let her mother feed her and her father sit beside her in the evenings, watching television without needing to fill the silence with explanations. She got her job back, a better one, actually, at a firm where a former colleague had recommended her without hesitation. And Rihanna lost the one thing she had never considered losing, her son's admiration. Because once Kamran saw his mother's behavior reflected back at him through someone else's, clear and unsparing eyes, he could not quite unsee it. He called Nadia twice. She did not answer, not out of bitterness, simply because some doors, once closed, are not meant to be reopened, only respected for what they finally made possible. Her car sat in the driveway of her father's house, clean and full of petrol, ready to take her anywhere she chose. And for the first time in 3 years, every road was hers.